go ahead and call this session of the Paulding Planning Commission to order for March. Remember, you've got about 9 more months until Christmas. So. This time, I advise everybody to please turn any audible devices that you may have off or silent so they don't interrupt the proceedings of this meeting. We're going to dispense with the reading of the minutes, but I will ask the Planning Commission if you've had a chance to review those. Are there any edits or comments that you'd like to make regarding those? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion regarding the minutes from the previous session of this body. So moved. To approve? To approve. I have a motion to approve from Mr. Ellis Aston and a second from Mr. Henson. All in favor? Motion passes 6-0 and 1. We have had 2 applications. I'm going to ask Chris if you'll address those, and then we're going to turn things over to Ms. Lippman to discuss the Uniform Development Code.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, application 2021-06Z by Shane Osmer, and also application 2102 SUP by Shane Osmer has been forwarded to the April 29th Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you very much. And Director Lippman, if you would please.
Okay, I think it's on now. We're going a little out of order on our agenda. We have a text amendment, but I thought that my update on the Unified Development Ordinance might be helpful when we get to that text amendment. So I'm sure many of you are aware, almost 2 years ago, we started working on a project to update all of our ordinances. I'm going to slip to my next page. We have a code of ordinances, we have a zoning ordinance, we have development regulations, and what we're working on right now is combining our zoning ordinance and our development regulations, and you can see those timeframes on there. Our zoning ordinance was adopted in 2003. It has, of course, been amended since then. Our development regulations have been in place pretty much as is since 1999, and we have been working to combine those in what's called a Unified Development Ordinance. And you know, I think we all know that our county administrator loves music, and he crushed my dreams. I wanted to play a clip from an old Cheers show, because a lot of what we're doing with this development regulations, these are pictures from Tirana, Albania. And I'm sure not a lot of people know where Albania is, but you probably remember when in the 80s, Coach was trying to teach Ted Danson's character something, and he was trying to teach him by singing, and for whatever reason, he sang a song about Albania. And I was reading something recently, and a recently elected mayor of Tirana, Albania, which is their capital, was an artist. And the first thing, if Tirana, or Albania, is a former communist country. It's located near Greece and Eastern Europe. And they literally painted buildings. So that's a lot of what we have done is we have changed the font, we have reformatted all the development regulations and our zoning ordinance into one document. So just to go over what's going to be in the Unified Development Ordinance, it's going to have 5 titles. The first title is administration. The second is zoning. Third is development. Fourth is signs. That's something that was in our code of ordinance that we're going to bring back into our development ordinance. And the 5th title is going to be telecommunications. So today I wanted to give the Planning Commission kind of an update on what's new with the zoning ordinance. Here's some of sort of the top 8 things that are new with the zoning ordinance. The first is the usage of North American Industrial Classification System. And Chris, if you'll, we've literally taken, and I have a little bit more about this in a little bit. We've converted almost all of the uses into the terminology used by the North American Industrial Classification System, and I'll go over that a little bit more in a little bit. We've added special exception uses. We've separated overlay districts from base districts. We are linking every zoning district with the future development map character areas. So we're making a suggestion as to what zoning districts are appropriate in what character areas. Come on. Here we go. Another one of the recommendations is to have site-specific rezoning to limit variance requests. This would be if someone came to the planning commission and wanted to rezone property to B2, but they needed a variance. They could do that at this meeting, rather than having to go to another meeting before the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're also suggesting, as we do in our November meeting, that we have separate meetings for the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. Sometimes at the 2 o'clock meeting, you may want to go look at the property. Board of Commissioners may want to, so there's a suggestion to have those as 2 separate meetings. We have a lot of color-coded charts. We're actually sort of recommending to change some of the colors of the zoning ordinance, and I'll show you that. And the document is going to use hyperlinks so that you won't have to flip from one section to the buffers. The document will take you right to that section, and we have some new zoning categories. So I'll just start with the new zoning categories. We have about 8 new zoning categories. The majority of those are commercial in nature. The first is an estate residential zoning district. It's something between A1, which requires a 5-acre minimum, and R2, which requires a 20,000 square foot minimum. Right now, we're looking at somewhere between 1 to 2 acre for a minimum for that, and you would perhaps in this kind of development not need curb and gutter. You could have ditch sidewalks. You might not be required to have streetlights because you might want to enjoy the night sky a little more. Some of the commercial districts we have is Planned Village Concept. That's kind of a mixed-use district that would have a basis of a commercial around residential. E-commerce retail, I think in the past year we've all increased our online shopping a lot. So this is, if you remember back in the day, the old service merchandise, this might be something Amazon might open a store where the back of it's warehouse and the front is a very limited retail, so we've designed a zoning district specifically for that. We also have one called E-commerce Business Park that is sort of similar to, it might be warehousing, but it might be smaller. I'll use the example of Amazon again. They might have a building that caters to what people in Paulding County want, so they don't only get it in 2 days, they get it in 2 hours. Another zoning district we're proposing is called Business to Consumer Logistics. We have limited industrial type uses that are mainly dealing with e-commerce sales. Another one is called Advanced Manufacturing Logistics. It's just a limited use of transportation and warehousing uses that aren't maybe as intense as what's in our current I-1 and I-2. The last commercial one is agricultural business. And we have proposed a Silver Comet Trail overlay district. Now that would be focused around the trailheads, and it would be an overlay that would go over that area that would allow higher intensity uses. Like it might allow bike shops, it might allow food trucks, or it might allow iDining, if you want to talk about that. So some of the other changes to the that I mentioned, every zoning district now has a link of which character areas it's appropriate in. This is just the purpose intent from the e-commerce business park, and if you look at the end, you'll see that it is appropriate in the community residential corridors and crossroads communities, wellness district, Wellstar hospital target area, and the Paulding County Airport target area. So every zoning district has a list of what is an appropriate character area. I mentioned color-coded charts. I can't talk today, sorry. So this, we're proposing to change some of the colors of the zoning districts to more of a traditional. Residential is usually yellow, and it gets closer to orange as it gets more high intensity, and commercial is usually shades of red, and industrial is blue. So this is just an example of dimensional standards for residential zoning districts, and it shows how these charts are going to be shown in the entire document. Another new use is special exception uses. Right now, a use is permitted or it requires a special use or a land use permit. We are proposing to have what we're calling special exception uses. That would mean that if they meet the criteria, and each one of these special exception uses has this criteria that they would have to meet and demonstrate compliance to the Planning and Zoning Division, then they would get a certificate and they could do that use. So I picked backyard chickens to show, and this also shows how the links work, because you would see that you can see where it's highlighted in blue. You would then click on that and it would take you to the section where all the special exceptions are. And then even within the backyard chickens, it refers to the animal control section in our code of ordinances. So you click on that section and it would take you right there. I mentioned that we converted almost all of our uses to the North American Industrial Classification System. That system is set up by the federal government. It's a way they classify business establishments for the purpose of collecting, analyzing, and publishing statistical data related to the United States business economy. And it's actually the same in Canada and Mexico, because it's the North American classification system. And there's probably millions of uses, and there's not many that you can think of that you can't get a NAICS number for. Here's an example. An old term in our ordinance was banks, including drive-in facilities. The NAICS term is commercial banking. So we've converted anywhere we had banks, it now says commercial banking. And just sort of as an aside note, there's a spot in our business license system for a NAICS number, and so our business license group has converted all of our businesses to the NAICS number so that we can track where our most businesses are, and if we have some target areas, we can work with economic development on that. And this next page is just a snapshot from the NAICS website, where here's the same commercial banking, and then it lists all the different things. So it actually kind of makes the zoning ordinance, it may seem like it's tighter, but there's so many uses under a broad category that I think it's actually going to expand our uses so that we don't have a lot of unclassified uses. So as I mentioned before, we have a couple things that are coming into the development ordinance that haven't been there for a while. That's signs, telecommunications. There'll be 2 chapters in the telecommunications section, and that's the towers and antennas, which was an appendix to the current zoning ordinance, I think, and small wireless facilities, which was put into the code of ordinance. So that will come into the UDO. So sort of the goal of the Unified Development Ordinance is from the very beginning to the very end of when you do a project, everything is in one book. So our next steps, we need to finish some work on Title III. Title II's almost ready to get out. We just need it. I have a couple eyes on it, checking for typos. So we should be, that's why I wanted to go ahead and make a presentation to this body, because Title II will be something that the Planning Commission will still make recommendations on, because it will serve as our zoning ordinance. We want to do some updates to our comprehensive plan. We're looking probably next month to bring to you an amendment dealing with broadband for the county and possibly Dallas and Hiram. Our comprehensive plan, for those of you who worked on it, is due next year. So we're going to start working on it in conjunction with the DOT on their comprehensive transportation plan, so we can get as many people looking at it. And the CTP, or the comprehensive transportation plan, a lot of their projects become part of the comprehensive plan. And when we do that update, we want to expand the crossroads character areas into parcel specific nodes. Right now we just kind of have some crosses on some major intersections, so that's what we want to do, more details and update our 5-year work program. And that is the end of the update. If anybody has any questions. And by the way, right now the document is 831 pages, so if anybody else would like to read it to check for typos, let me know. But we'll hope to be getting the Title II out to you guys soon for your review and approval.
I have one question, Ann. I've noticed there are several companies, and also, from what I understand, some of the EMCs are pushing the solar panels, and is that something that should meet some of the county requirements of placing these solar panels, or?
They would have to get a, if it was a house, they do have to get a permit, but I think, because I know Greystone has a solar panel farm, and I think they fall under the Public Service Commission. Jason, stop me if I'm saying anything wrong, and they are exempt.
But I've noticed a lot, several companies are pushing either the solar panels on the roofs of the houses, and I have seen one in Tennessee. It apparently was like a size of one you would put on your house, but it was in the backyard of this place. So
Well,
I'm just wondering if that's something that we would have a requirement for.
We could certainly research and see what some other people have done so that it doesn't, I mean, that is kind of one of the looking to the future things, sort of like the e-commerce. So we will
Right.
definitely look into solar energy to see if there's anything that we need to include in this document.
Thank you.
And I have a question. Is this going to be a PDF or is this going to be a web-based?
It'll be both, and it'll be all. You could, if you wanted to print it out, it could be a document, but it will, to make the links work, it will be a PDF
Okay.
that we would put on our website.
Okay, wonderful. And then, are you adding any more zoning categories, or are you just kind of defining and recategorizing what's currently there?
Every zoning district has had a set of eyes on it because every use has been converted to NAICS. And then we've added uses that we thought belonged, but there are no, other than estate residential and the planned village concept, there are no new residential zoning districts, but only the planned village concept, and then the sort of, they're the bridge between your commercial and your industrial. So there was about 6 of those: the agricultural business, e-commerce retail, business to consumer logistics. Those are new.
So the planned village, to me, almost sounds like the intent of the original PRD, where you've got commercial up front and residential in the back. Is that
Yes,
correct?
Yes, it's modeled loosely on our neighbor to the east's zoning district of the same name.
Okay. And still no townhouse zoning.
I think planned village concept allows some, but not at 100%.
Okay,
It
because
would-
I've had
it
a
would
lot
still
of,
have to be a mix.
and I've had a lot of people call me on properties that I have that are looking to do a mix. So, but the townhouse product that we currently have has stayed the same with no changes, correct? It's not considered townhouse, it's considered, what's it called?
Chris, help me out. R7 is the,
Multifamily fee simple.
It's multifamily fee simple. It's a townhome condo zoning district.
And how many are those per acre? Do you know off the top of your head?
4 units per net acre.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, the only statement I'll make is I've been privileged to be included in the process of being able to sit at the meetings. I know that what you've engaged in with you and your staff has been meticulous and tedious. It's not an easy thing to try to go back and, improve the wheel, let alone try to reinvent it in some aspects. So I commend you for that. It'd be an interesting read. I know 800 pages is something, but I think we could all manage to at least get through
31.
parts of it. There we go. Are there any other questions from the Planning Commission to Ms. Lippman? Board of Commissioners, any questions?
there are no pictures right now. There are some colorful graphs. We'll see what we can do about some pictures. We wanted to go ahead and we want to start moving on it as fast as possible. Hopefully we'll have something for you guys to review. We've had some of our planning and zoning staff out sick, and we're doing some edits because we don't want to put anything out. So I don't want to promise that it would be out in April, but hopefully no later than May.
So the village, that new zoning category, that'll be out next week?
Well, it will be out probably for public review. I don't know. Hopefully by the summer that'd be adopted.
On a serious note, to have this ready before the comprehensive plan renewal, I think that's extremely valuable, don't you?
Yes. And that's what, I mean, a simple thing as tying every zoning district to a character area on the future land use map helps Chris when somebody comes in and says, I want to build tiny houses in Yorkville. Well, Lori, is there any sewer in Yorkville? It just would help staff steer people to where they can do, where things are appropriate. So that's why we had, I can't remember off the top of my head how many of the crossroads, we had Seward, crossroad communities, unsewered crossroad communities, and the intersection of 92 and 278 is a high intensity crossroad. So we just, this summer, I mean, even when the county was closed and when we couldn't have people in this building, a small group of people was working it. That's the NAICS. A lot of that was done last summer when, you know, we met through Zoom and people worked at home. And I know it was a lot easier for me to convert all those uses, because all of those uses, the only uses that we didn't convert to NAICS are things where we want to use a state definition, such as childcare. They have their own definitions, and we don't want to defer from that. We want to keep that the same. So, and you can ask anybody who's been on our UDO team about how long we've looked at definitions. And I think recently we've all gotten an appreciation for how important definitions are. So that's actually going to be the last thing. When we get everything else together, we're going to put every definition that's in the entire document in one section. And so that's going to be last. So if anybody else wants to rewrite a zoning ordinance, do the definitions last.
I'm absolutely convinced that if your definitions section isn't as thick as the actual document, you've probably not done your job.
Yes. And there are, I'm sure a lot of you are aware, we've been working with Bentley from Marietta, and they've provided us with some ordinances, like pawn shops, what else, Chris? Help me. Sexually oriented businesses, food trucks. Even there's an ordinance, there's a state law that concerns those charity boxes that you see in parking lots. So we've got some ordinances like that that will go in the code of ordinances. So we are getting towards the end.
Well, I'm encouraged by the work that I've seen done on it by you and your staff and everybody who's taken part in it. So I commend you, and I know we've been dealing with laws of unintended consequences with this previous ordinance. You've made a profession out of it, just about. So I'm glad to see the changes upcoming. If there's no further discussion, I'll ask again, any questions? Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners? Then we will move on to the topic at hand, zoning ordinance text amendment, and who would like to introduce that?
Go for it.
All right. Yeah, the next item is the zoning ordinance text amendment. It's a text amendment of the Paulding County Zoning Ordinance 2003 as amended to Article 8, Section R, Low Density Quality Residential Development Overlay District. And before we get into description, I have just a little bit of history on this thing. It came about in February 2007, which is now 14 years ago. The overall idea of this overlay for the southeastern portion of the county came from a study from a consultant that was hired back then. The overall goal was to push development standards in that southern or southeastern portion of the county to some of the same trends in the northeastern portion, to try and have developments down there similar to Bentwater. And so it would establish some architectural controls, more landscaping controls, lot standards, and aesthetics for the design of the green space and the street networks. And so that was put into place back in 2007. Of course, markets change, building design standards change for houses and such, and here 14 years later we're re-looking at it, trying to make it a little more concise and not overlap on some things that's already required in the base zoning districts.
And on your screen is a map showing the low density quality residential development overlay district where it applies. The number one change I'm recommending is to change the name to the Sweetwater Overlay District. That name comes from follows the Sweetwater sewer drainage basin, and it's a lot easier to say and is much more pleasant than, because I have to say low density quality residential very slowly or I say it incorrectly. So 90% of the changes you see in this is changing the name. And these changes came out of our review of the Unified Development Ordinance. We will probably be bringing you sooner, perhaps rather than developing, adopting the entire UDO, a change or an elimination of the Paulding Airport Master Overlay District, which is 24 pages long. Has 41 different criteria that you have to meet. Just a little history of what's in the, let's just call it the Sweetwater Overlay District now. The only developments that it affects are, well, it affects anything residential above R2. So R2 with sewer, R5, R7, PRD, OSRD, and we make an amendment to add that this would apply if anything were zoned to R55 and MPR. Let's see what else some of the highlights are. We took out some of the open space requirements because we thought that the open space in the existing PRDs, and I think that's what I was going to do. You can see on this map the purple shaded areas are projects that are zoned PRD. There are 5,252 lots zoned PRD in the overlay area. 3 of them, the Georgian, Meriwether Place, and Camden Lake, meet the exemption that this does not apply to them, so that removes 1,935 lots from the overlay. So that leaves 3,317 lots that the overlay would apply to. There are 1,123 located in Post 2 and 2,194 lots located in Post 3. We might have a map that has a better breakdown of where the posts are, and a little bit is in Post 1, but you don't have anything but R2 in your section. So one of the things, the big things that we want to change, there were some house requirements, and some of the changes we've made to R55 and MPR. We have the applicant submitting elevations, and it be something like with an MPR that the Planning Commission would look at and the Board of Commissioners would approve that elevation. So in this case, we've put in language saying that if it's already been approved, they would need to submit house elevations for the Board of Commissioners to approve. Major other changes. So we took out sort of you had to pick, how many, Chris? 6 out of 12 characteristics, but some of these are very similar, but we'd rather see what you actually want to build and approve what you're going to build, and then have our staff verify that. And other than changing the name, the big thing, and I think some feedback we want from the Planning Commission, is there was a requirement of different dimensional standards for single-family detached dwellings and PRDs and OSRDs, which to date, Chris, nothing in the county is zoned open space residential, correct? So if you look on page 3, and it's the section that's highlighted, there's front setbacks, because if you know in PRD, they set their own setbacks, but this overlay would put a minimum requirement. So sort of the question we have, we were going to take out the 80% of the dwellings must be 24 square feet or larger, but the question we'd like some input is on the minimum lot width of 70 feet for PRDs and 80 feet for open space residential. So I'll take a breath and let somebody ask a question.
And one thing to note, on the base zoning on these PRDs, the Planned Residential Development District did not set any standards for lot widths or building setbacks for homes. That was totally left up to the developer through the permitting or through the plating process. This added that additional, like the setback of 25 feet, that would be for, the reason that was put in there is because we were having issues with, in PRDs where the home was closer to the street, and the cars were backed up into sidewalks. And so that was to try and push at least the garage and such back to eliminate some of those problems.
Do we want to discuss that particular issue
Yes.
at this point? Then I would open that up. I said, I know I've spoken with at least one member of the Board of Commissioners, and I've had some discussion with you, Chris, and some of the expectation or some of the numbers that I've heard put out would be between 60 and 70 feet for a minimum lot width. Now, is there any particular advantage to extending or to increasing it to the 70-foot width line? I mean, anything in particular that would be detrimental to, or?
The 70-foot minimum that's in there right now for PRDs is probably a lot larger than most PRDs have developed under. Some of them has gone down to at least 45 feet. Probably on an 8,000 square foot lot, that might be a little tight with the 70-foot widths. I don't want to get where you're down to hardly anything. So to look at anything at least above 60 feet, you'd want to try and maintain a standard. And so the number I've heard is 65 would be a nice number.
At 65, most houses, to get to the square footages that you were looking at originally, 2,000 to 2,400, your houses are going to be 40 foot wide at a minimum on 2 stories. It's hard to build a ranch house narrower than 40 feet. So if you're at 40, you got 15-foot separation between houses. That gives you 7.5 feet each side of the house. So that puts you at 55 at a minimum. A lot of the houses that I build at 2,400 may be 46 feet wide. So it's going to push you up into the 60s that you actually need to build the house. So a lot of times the widths will determine the product.
And that's only concerning the PRDs that are already zoned, is that correctly? Because we've done away with that zoning.
That's correct. That's correct. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are remaining in that area that have not developed.
With those 5, I mean, looking at the entire Sweetwater Basin and looking at the map, knowing where sewer is, we're really not going to see that many unless sewer expands.
I wouldn't think so.
So, I mean, if you look at Davis Mill and Hiram Sooty, how far am I from sewer? So I'm not going to bring something in to zone it that's a category greater density than R2 would be anyway. So the overlay wouldn't apply to most developments you're going to see currently in that area, except for what maybe is already zoned or what is zoned near existing sewer.
And one thing to keep in mind, that same time frame back in 2007, there was a negotiations between Cobb County and Paulding County regarding sewer service in this area. There's an agreement with Cobb County, and they've met their agreement, and now sewer is to the county line. At this moment, until the county service is available down there and it's expanded, we cannot take any zoning applications for residential purposes in that Sweetwater Basin.
And the 92 corridor will be right now first priority, is that correct, for commercial or?
That is definitely a target area that we have talked about on comp plan update. Is we definitely want to preserve that 92 corridor for something that's non-residential development.
Have we developed an overlay for that 92 corridor to protect it?
Well, right at this time, just for development standards, there is an overlay on it for non-residential that would set aesthetics and development standards. As far as preserving that for non-residential, that's something that we would definitely address in the comp plan update. That way we have a adopted plan that would give us the opportunity to tell someone, no, we're not going to have residential in this area because that's our non-residential commercial retail office area.
Thank
And
you.
so the comp plan is the more important for preserving that area at this time.
And there were two, when staff looked at this, there was 2 changes. DOT requested a change. The Sweetwater overlay requires a traffic study. Initially, it said if it was over 200 units, we had suggested changing that to 4, but George and his team wanted to leave that at 200. That's on the last page. And our operations director wanted to change to, it's page 2, section D, relationship to underlying zoning district standards. Change the second sentence to read, any case where the standards and requirements of the Sweetwater Overlay District are more restrictive with those than of the base district or other provisions of the county, the stricter would apply. So that's just sort of a. So I think our question that we want some input in is on the minimum lot width. Do we need to leave that at 70 or reduce it to something as low as 65, or just get rid of it?
If you get rid of it, then, yeah.
I think I'd leave it at 70, because like Mr. Stover, Commissioner Stover pointed out in the previous meeting, Paulding County's got a lot of elevation changes in a lot of the properties, and you've got to install swales, create swales around these, each home to drain properly. So, you know, if you've got a piece of property with a steeper topography, then you get a narrower than 70 feet, you have a problem getting the swales in for the proper drainage.
What do the zoning districts that are covered by this, what are their minimum, maximum widths? Do we know roughly off the top of our head? I mean, the greater the density, usually the smaller they were.
PRD doesn't have one. You set that
Okay.
on your development plan.
The minimum lot width in R2 with sewer district is actually 85 feet at the building line, and 75 if it's in the cul-de-sac or curb.
Right. Any other zoning district?
What's the OSRD?
I think it's like PRD.
I mean, 60, just from my input, 65 works. You know, I mean, everything that I currently build, 65 works. And it gives you probably more than some needed. I mean, some builders build a narrow house.
Always go with the school system. I mean, Scott,
Yeah.
and who was behind me. Thank you. Don't you love engineers have everything just, sewer, like I said, the R2 with sewer 85, the NPR 70-foot minimal widths, and the OSRD 80-foot, and the low-density quality residential district, not this overlay, is also 80 feet. Thank you, sir.
Board of Commissioners, do you want to give any input to this? I mean, you hear us batting around a couple of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with James and Ellis both. I mean, 65 to 70, I think should be a minimum. I mean, even with that NPR that we just put in place, I think the minimum lot width on it is a 70. So, you know, yeah, can you build a house on a 45 lot, width lot? Yeah, you can, but is that what we want here in Paulding County? Maybe not. Of course, everybody's got their own opinion. So, I mean, I think to build a quality home, I feel like it needs you need a little bit of lot width. I mean, you know, I build some, and my minimum's 100 foot, and sometimes I have a hard time fitting mine on there. You know, so sometimes it fits very well, but for me to leave my development and go home feeling good about it, I like to have a little bit of space between the houses. So. And that's just my own opinion, but I think 65 to 70 by far should be our minimum.
Just an opinion, I think the wider we can go, and it's in the ballpark, in the range of what you experienced people know. So in this case, I would just say 70.
Anybody else on the Board of Commissioners? Ms. Seaver, did you have something?
Yes, I do. Now, help me to understand, this is not replacing the current low-density quality residential, correct? It's just,
There's two. There's a low-density quality residential development overlay district, and there's a low-density quality residential development district.
okay.
This
and-
is modifications to the overlay district.
And that's in just those certain areas?
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing we do want to do, this is probably not a permanent overlay. One of the things that we see coming out of our comp plan study is area studies in the north and the south, because what the housing preferences in the north might be different than in the south. We'd like to have overlays for different areas of the county, so we'd like to have studies so we can get public input on those. And as a sort of reference, we have a Paulding Airport master overlay, and we'd like to take a look at that too. So that's sort of breaking these overlay districts out, kind of, when we blew the dust off, it sort of, because no one has fallen under the low density quality, now to be known as Sweetwater Overlay District. No one has had to meet these standards.
But the developable qualities of the land that you would find, say, in the northwestern section of the county versus the southeastern section or southwestern is different as well.
Yes.
That ends up having a direct impact on what gets built within what we're talking about.
Yes.
So,
So this is sort of step one. We want to clean up some of these overlay districts before we get them into the new Unified Development Ordinance, but they will probably change again in the near future to something even simpler and easier to implement.
Mr. Hofstadter, do you have any questions?
No, not at this time. Trying to soak it all in. Looking at future impacts on how we could impact it.
And it might be helpful, Lori, could I ask you how close sewer is getting to these areas that have already been zoned? Obviously, the Georgian has sewer, but how close are some of these on the southeast corner to getting sewer?
Of course, at the upstream end of the basin, we have sewer in the Georgian with the upper Sweetwater plant. If you look in the area near number 3, in the southeast portion, we've already been in conversation with a couple of developers looking at those PRDs, and about extending sewer up into that area, none of which has come to fruition at this point. But we have sewer at the county line. We've sewered the further up 92 Ridge Road north, almost to Bill Caruth. That area is sewered and is using that interconnection with Cobb now. So there's sewer in that portion of the drainage basin today. It appears that sewer will be extended up to those areas near number 3 next, and then continued development.
Thank you.
Keith, one question. Is the Georgian at capacity, or can it be expanded in that area along
Right now,
South 61?
Right now, it's significantly under capacity. It has an ability to have a stream discharge that we've never built the outfall to because we haven't needed it. So yeah, there is potential there.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the Board of Commissioners to either Ms. Lippman or anybody else on staff? Planning Commission? Ms. Lippman, would you please, let's summary the requested changes. We've got the minimum lot width, an idea there. What we were talking about on page 2 at the top, section D, was
Yes.
that the one about the stricter of the standards would
Yes.
apply?
Yes.
And then we have on page 7, I believe it's in paragraph 8A, which is the traffic study. It's requested by Paulding DOT that the dwelling units remain at 200. correct?
Yes.
So, thank you very much. This time, I'm going to open the floor to public comment regarding the text amendments proposed here. And I will give anybody who wishes to rush into the door or come up and make a comment to do so. Hearing none, I'm going to close the public comment section, portion of this meeting. And at this time, unless there's anything to be added by Planning Commission or the Board of Commissioners, I'm going to entertain a motion with regard to the text amendment for the zoning ordinance. And if you would, when you make that amendment, please be mindful of the summary of changes that we've discussed in your motion. And I will entertain that motion now.
Yeah, I make a motion, we approve with the three changes that you mentioned, including the 70-foot
70
minimum
foot.
width.
So I have a motion for Mr. Aston to approve the text amendment, make a recommendation to approve with the stricter of the two ordinances to apply, of the standards to apply from section D on page 2.
Does that include 200 or 400 on the traffic study?
It's 200 on the traffic study. So it's 200 on the traffic study, which is on page 7, that's paragraph 8A. And then also with regard to paragraph E on page 3, subsection 5, that is to establish a 70-foot minimum lot width. So at this moment, I would ask, is there a second to Mr. Aston's motion?
I second.
I have a second from Ms. Seaver. All in favor? Motion passes 6-0 and 1. Thank you very much for working through that. Again, my compliments to Paulding County staff. You did a great job. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make the motion.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Steele. Do I have a second? Ms. Fitzgerald made the second. All in favor? Motion passes 6-0 and 1. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your month, and please stay healthy and safe.